Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322. So we have had a lot of new people to the channel recently, and I see a lot of the same questions being asked in the comments of some videos about sort of tyres, which are the best tyres to use, what modifications you need on cars, why some cars are quicker than others, what makes good cars good off-road, things like that. I have already answered pretty much all of that kind of stuff as part of this series. So if you click the link in the description, you'd be taken to the playlist that contains all of the videos as part of this series. Apart from the first three, which you don't really need to bother about, I highly recommend watching all of these because it just gives you a wealth of information about vehicle performance, what makes a car quicker, what you need to be doing, what modifications you need to be adding to cars, what just goes in depth on the game itself and how to be quicker in a racing situation or just quicker in general. So I highly recommend watching this series if you're at all new and you have any questions whatsoever. I'll also be referencing various videos that I've already made in this video, so I'll leave links to that in the description as well. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there first of all, just before we started, because we do have a lot of new people to the channel, and I just want to thank you guys for being here. So let's get into the main topic of this video, and this entire discussion is going to be based around the idea of curb boosting. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to explain it quickly here, but I have covered it in a previous video as part of this series. But it's basically the idea that any bump or curb that you hit on the road in the game, it compresses the suspension of the car in such a way that you get a rev boost and a slight increase in speed. It's how all the pro racers get their quickest lap times. It's basically the most important aspect of the game to increasing speed in a racing situation, apart from using correct racing lines. So what it does is basically you hit a bump, the suspension of the car compresses, hits the rear wheels, and it just basically gives the engine a little bit of a boost, and you get a slight increase in speed when you do that. And obviously over the course of a lap or a long straightaway, if you are doing this a lot of times, you can get quite a significant increase in speed by doing that. Now, all top speed bugs and glitches that you've ever experienced or that have ever happened in this game are based on this fundamental aspect of GTA physics. This fundamental part of the game is the cause of all of them, and it underpins everything that we're going to be talking about in this video. So feel free to go back and watch the video about that. Again, I'll link it in the description, but that's a quick explanation of what it actually is. Now, there's many ways to make a car go faster in GTA. The first and most common of those is the Rapid GT. That's the one that a lot of people knew from the very start of the game, but people didn't know why it worked. Well, it's basically this phenomenon of curb boosting. So what happens is with the Rapid GT that a lot of people do is where you slam it. So what you do is you shoot the rear wheels, and the car basically, it causes, by doing that, it causes the rear of the car, the suspension, to sort of break. And when you start traveling along at speed, you're causing very small compressions of the suspension in exactly the same way as when you go over a bump in the game. So because it does that, you're getting constant rev boosts from this compression of the suspension. What happens is that, say this is, these are only tiny little suspension compressions, these are only tiny little aspects where the rear wheels are hitting against the back of the car. But because it's happening, say, every single frame, 30 times a second, that really does add up, and it gives you a huge increase in speed. So you're traveling along, and the rear of the car is compressing really, really quickly all the time, and you're getting a tiny little speed increase from every single time that happens. But because it's happening so often, your top speed increases significantly. Now, that also makes the car terrible to handle. I just pointed out there, it's very difficult to get it around the corners without spinning out because of that, because it just completely wrecks the way that the car handles at the rear end. But it does increase your top speed quite significantly. Now, obviously, that is useless in a racing situation, which is why it's never really been covered too much on this channel, because you've actually got to get out of the car and shoot the rear wheels. If you can't do that in a racing situation, and even if you could, you would lose so much time from getting out of a car and shooting the rear wheels and getting this to work that it wouldn't even be effective. But it is something that you can do, and it's caused by this whole idea of getting a rev boost from any little bump that you hit on the road. Now, this is also more effective on PC. I'm going to take a little bit of a moment to talk about PC, because as I mentioned, this might happen every single frame. So the suspension is compressing every frame, and every single frame you're getting a boost from the vehicle. Now, on console, everything runs at 30 frames per second, so there's a theoretical limit to the amount of times that can happen. But on PC, you could get more frames. You might be running at 60 frames a second, so these compressions might happen 60 times every second instead of 30. So you're getting more of a boost from that, and you're going to be reaching higher speeds by doing that. But also in general on PC, curb boosting and hitting these boosts around and hitting these sort of these bumps around the track to give you a boost, they do have a more significant effect the more frames that you're running at. Basically, more frames equals more compressions of the suspension, which equals more small speed boosts and equals higher speeds overall achievable. So even on regular racing circuits where, you know, cornering is a factor, you're still going to be able to get quicker lap times on PC because of this. Now, I just wanted to point that out because this is notable. This whole bug of top speed is a lot more noticeable on PC with some cars than it is on console, because, like I said, there's a theoretical limit to what's possible on the consoles. But also just to point out, you know, if you are on PC, somebody who's running a higher frame rate than you will be at a significant advantage. So, you know, just to point out there that PC isn't necessarily the most balanced in that respect, because ultimately, as long as you're driving properly, more frames equals better lap times in general. So that's a decent background to moving on to the next step, which is that some cars can actually get this effect without doing anything to them. So there are some cars in the game where you don't even need to get out and shoot the rear tyres like you have to do to a Rapid GT. And also just to point out that it's not the Rapid GT that you can do that on. You can do that on a vast majority of cars and it will still increase their speed. The Rapid GT is, I think, just the first one that it was noticed with. But there's actually some cars that get this curb boosting constant compression of the suspension effect even without doing anything to them. And those cars are the Fister 811, the Slam Van Custom and the Banshee 900R. And you may notice that those cars have either been involved in a top speed bug in the past, or they have very, very high top speeds. Obviously the 811 and the Banshee 900R currently have the two highest top speeds in the entire game, and that's even on console. So this is just generally a bug caused by the suspension geometry of those cars. They simply cause these compressions all the time. Now, as I mentioned, on console, that doesn't necessarily matter too much because there's a theoretical limit to what that can cause, and ultimately the 811 and the Banshee 900R and the Slam Van Custom, they don't reach such high top speeds on the console version, because that theoretical limit of the effect that this compression of the suspension is having isn't all that great. You know, the top speeds are pretty reasonable. But if you have those cars on PC, you'll be going at significantly higher top speeds, again because of this bug. Now, there may be some other cars in the game where this happens, but only to a very, very small degree that is not noticeable. These are just the most sort of noticeable ones because the speeds that they reach are ridiculous. And, you know, if you have an 811 on PC, on console its top speed is about 132 miles per hour, which makes it the quickest car in the game by a few miles per hour over the others. But on PC you can reach crazy speeds because you're running at higher frames. So at higher frame rates, these cars that are getting this boost without actually doing anything are going to be going a lot quicker in terms of top speed. So those are some cars that just get it all the time. Now, you may remember that there was a bug also with the Slam Van Custom where for a few days you could basically put the lowest suspension on it and then lower the back end using the hydraulics of the car, and that would also make it ridiculously quick. So that was a bug caused by this exact same thing. All of these crazy high top speeds, all of these top speed bugs that you've ever seen in the past are all caused by this phenomenon of curb boosting, and the fact that in some cases you can get these constant curb boosts without actually doing anything to the car. So the Slam Van Custom, you know, you would raise the front end, the back end would lower. That would compress the suspension of the back end. It would cause the rear wheels to hit against the body, and you would get constant curb boosts. You would get constant compressions of the suspension, and even on console, that would give you crazy high top speeds because you were basically breaking the game in that respect and just, you know, getting such a lot of boosts all the time. Now, to those of you who don't know anything about that, that was actually patched fairly quickly. That was patched within a couple of days because it was so obvious and pretty much all the big YouTubers covered it. But yeah, that was, just keep in mind that was patched, and now the Slam Van Custom does have a pretty standard top speed on console, but it still gets this effect. It's still got this bug on PC, and like I said, the 811, the Slam Van Custom, and the Banshee 900R do have much higher top speeds on PC because of this bug than they do on console. And again, there's probably some other cars out there that do have this bug again with them, but we don't notice it because that's just part of the car, and then they're not really reaching ridiculously high top speeds. But ultimately, in general, all of my testing, for example, apart from these few outliers, it's all exactly the same on PC to console, just that you'd be getting a little bit quicker lap times on PC because you can just generally run at higher frames. Now it's time to talk about the 3 new supercars that came with the Cunning Stunts update. Now, as you may have seen on some other videos or even experienced yourself, those new supercars in some situations can get quite high top speeds, and even higher top speeds than what I showed in my top speed testing video. And as you may have probably guessed already, that's because the same thing that we've been talking about all the way through this video is happening to them to varying degrees with certain setups on the cars. So basically, again, exactly the same thing as with the Slam Van Custom. There was certain things that you could do to the Slam Van Custom to cause these compressions of the suspension, cause these constant curb boosts, and then that would give it a higher top speed. The same thing is happening with these 3 cars. There's certain aspects that you can do to the cars to get this exact same effect, where you get more constant curb boosts and get higher top speeds. Just like with the Rapid GT though, it does make them handle worse in the corners. Now again, on PC this is a lot more noticeable because these cars are running at higher frames and getting this effect a lot more, so they're getting higher top speeds. But even on console, they're going to reach ridiculously high top speeds, just like the Slam Van Custom did, because the effect that it's having is quite significant, and certainly more significant than you see from the natural bump bug that you get from the 811 or the Banshee 900R or something like that, where it's only on PC where it shows to be broken, whereas on console you can definitely see the difference with these new cars. And the one car that seems to get it more so than the others is the RE7B. So what you have to do to make the RE7B go quicker and have this effect is basically, it doesn't matter what suspension you have on, doesn't matter what level of suspension you have on the car, any will work. But all you need is the custom spoiler, which is the carbon spoiler, the second option, and stock tyres. Stock tyres will work, but also high-end tyres or sports tyres, something like that, where the sidewall of the tyre isn't very thick. I'm going to come on to why that works in a second. But basically, if you do that, what will happen is that you'll get exactly the same effect as what we've been talking about all the way through this video. Constant compressions of the suspension, constant increases in speed all the time, and you will be going a lot quicker in a straight line than what you would if you didn't have this set up on the car. And the RE7B is where it happens most clearly, but it also does happen to the 2 other new supercars as well, which is the Tyrus and the ETR1. It does happen as well, so you can go a little bit quicker with those with again stock tyres on and the aftermarket spoiler, but it's not quite as bad as what it is with the RE7B. So you're not going to be reaching the same levels of top speeds, but you are certainly going to be going quicker than what you saw in my testing video for the top speeds, because basically that is the speeds these cars actually should be going without this bug acting upon them. Now, as I said, this does make the cars handle worse in the corners. So on my testing track, for example, putting this setup on the cars will make them go slower. It will make them go a couple of seconds slower than what they would otherwise. But because they can go so quick in a straight line, it doesn't take much for a track to favour a car that has this setup, as long as you can actually utilise that top speed for a reasonable amount of time around the track. Obviously my track doesn't really have that much of top speed useful to it, but as long as you can do that, this will be a quicker setup than just the standard setup. So why does this work on the 3 new cars in particular? That's what we need to get down to, because obviously with the 811 and the Banshee 900R, it's just a natural part of the suspension geometry of those cars that cause this to happen, and really that should be fixed by Rockstar as well, but I think they just don't know about it, to be honest. Obviously it was fixed with the Slam Van Custom when there was a specific way to do it, but again, there's probably just some cars out there where this happens and you just don't notice it. But like the Slam Van Custom, there is a way to actually make these cars go quicker. So it's likely that this will be patched when, as soon as Rockstar know about it and figure out a way to fix it, it's probably going to be patched, because this isn't the intended way that these cars are meant to drive. And yeah, it's the Slam Van Custom all over again, basically. This isn't a natural part of the suspension geometry of these cars. There's actually something that you've got to do to make them go quicker. And what we've always seen in the past, that when that's the case, Rockstar do eventually patch it. So how does this work on the 3 new cars? Well, this is something that is quite difficult to explain, but I'm going to do my best, because the 3 new cars basically have, well, actually four of the new cars from the Cunning Stunts update have a brand new aspect to car performance in the game handling files called a downforce multiplier. This is something that we haven't seen on any other vehicle in the game before. This is directly from the handling files from the game code. I'll leave a link to the spreadsheet in the description where you can find out all about this. But again, I have covered all of this sort of stuff in previous videos in this series. But they've got it's a brand new feature for the cars called a downforce multiplier. And the reason that this only works on the 7B with the aftermarket spoiler is because I believe that the spoiler is causing this downforce multiplier to activate. So the RE7B has a downforce multiplier of 3.5. I think it's the Tyrus has a downforce multiplier of 3.35. The ETR1 has a downforce multiplier of 3. This is sort of 3 times, and then 3.5 times, and then 3.35 times. And then the Omni also has a downforce multiplier of 2. So just to point out that although the Omni, I'm not sure why the Omni has this downforce multiplier available to it, but it's not affected by the things that we're talking about in here. You can't make the Omni go any quicker, although it does have this downforce multiplier. But if you remember back to the Cunning Stunts showcase video, those were the 4 cars that didn't get a traction boost from the spoiler in Los Santos Customs. So normally when you put a spoiler on any car in GTA, as long as it's not the stock spoiler, if you put an aftermarket spoiler on, a secondary option spoiler, that will increase the traction stat of the car. And you can see that in Los Santos Customs. You can actually see the bar increase in Los Santos Customs, telling you that the traction has increased. But that doesn't happen for these 4 cars when you put the spoilers on them. The traction bar just doesn't increase. So it's, from what I can tell, it seems like adding a spoiler to these cars activates that downforce multiplier. It activates that natural downforce multiplier that has just been put in the game for these cars. Why they did this, I don't know. Maybe they wanted to make these cars as quick as they are now, but the sort of trying to increase the actual traction stat in the normal way that they do with the spoiler wouldn't have made them quick enough. Maybe there was a limit to what they could do with that, so they've had to add this downforce multiplier, and basically it's the spoilers that are available to the car that activate this, because that's why it doesn't work with the stock spoiler for the 7B. So basically what happens is that you put the custom spoiler on the car, the carbon spoiler on the 7B, it activates this downforce multiplier, and what it does is push the car into the ground. If anybody knows anything about downforce, it pushes the car into the ground. And obviously because the spoiler's on the rear wing, it pushes the rear of the car into the ground. It makes it go a lot quicker around corners, obviously, as we've seen from the testing. But yeah, it pushes the rear of the car into the ground, and what it does is then activates this whole idea of compressing the suspension, because the rear of the car's been pushing against the rear tires, compressing the suspension, giving lots of little boosts, and then you reach insanely high top speeds. And again, it's the same story for the Tyrus and the ETR1, which also have quite high downforce multipliers. You put the extra spoiler on and you're able to go a little bit quicker in a straight line if you have the right tires available. So that's one half of it. That's only one half of why this works, because the other half is the tire type. Why does it only work with stock tires or high-end tires, but it doesn't work with, for example, off-road tires? Well, again, I've covered this before in this series already, but there's an aspect of car performance and the handling files of the car called tires can clip. That's the official name of it. So basically what this means is if a car has this aspect to it, and not very many cars do. The tires, it acts as though the tire can clip through the ground, basically. So it acts as if the rim of the tire is the outside of the tire rather than the actual outside of the tire. So for the vast majority of cars, if you put a tire on, the road is connecting with the outside of the tire. But there are some cars, like a Masacro, for example, like a Jester race car, for example, and some other cars, where, and a lot of the supercars like the T20 as well, where if you put the tire on, it's not using the outside of the tire to connect to the road. It's actually using the rim of the tire. So that means that the bigger the tire sidewall is, the distance between the outside of the tire and the rim of the tire, the easier you can go over bumps. And again, I've explained this before, but basically off-road tires are the best for this because they've got a huge sidewall, and you know, when you go over a bump in off-road tires, in cars that have this aspect to them, it's a lot smoother than going over it in high-end tires. Now, the 3 new supercars also have this aspect to them, so the tires can clip aspect is also on those. So when you have off-road tires on the car, the suspension isn't hitting the back of the wheels because the tires are clipping into the road, so you don't get the same effect from doing that. Whereas when you're using stock tires or when you're using high-end tires, there's a much less distance between the back of the car and the top of the tire. So when these sort of suspension compressions are happening, they're happening a lot quicker because they're hitting the top of the tire a lot earlier. So that's why that's happening only with stock tires, for example, rather than off-road tires. And obviously, I do all my testing on off-road tires, which is, you know, the best for circuit performance. And actually, this downforce multiplier makes it such that the car will actually corner better with off-road tires. So, you know, again, that's because of this bug. The same thing with the Rapid GT, where it will corner better just normally and it doesn't corner quite as well when you have it slammed, because you're not having this compression of the suspension on the back of the rear tires, and you're able to just basically take the turns as quickly as you want. But the downside of that is that you don't have as high top speeds because you don't have this bug acting on the car. So that's pretty much it. I think I've covered everything. Now, it's been a lot in this video, and I make no apologies about that because there's a lot to it, but I want to make sure that I cover everything so that you guys can understand exactly why this is happening and exactly what's happening to these cars. It's not just a case that the 7B has a bug and you know, you can go really high top speeds. I always want to try and explain it as much as possible so that you guys can understand why it's happening and understand why in soon enough it's probably going to be patched, because it's not intended behavior from these cars. But obviously, in the meantime, you can put the carbon spoiler on your 7B, leave the stock tires on your 7B, and you can get insanely high top speeds with it. So, you know, enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. But yeah, that's exactly what causes it. And any top speed bug that you've ever known about or even see in the future, it's caused by this exact same phenomenon of compressing of the suspension lots of little times, giving you lots of small rev boosts, and basically giving you an increase in speed. So yeah, that should be it. If you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, look in the description for relevant video links. Look at the fact finding series, because I've explained a lot of stuff about that, all of this kind of stuff in there. Watch those videos, and then once you've watched everything, if you still have questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to answer it as best as I can or cover it in a future video. But hopefully I've been able to explain this as well as I can, and hopefully you guys have learned something from this video, because that's all I really want. So thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed and like the video, if you found it helpful, and leave a comment what you think about all of this down below. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.